So the topic that we are going to discuss today is that about antitubercular drugs, and this particular disease, tuberculosis, mainly caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, is as old as the man himself. Previously, it was called as phthisis, and there were a lot of sanatoriums and isolation areas built for the isolation of these patients who were suffering from tuberculosis. The disease itself is such old that when mummies were dug out from the Egyptian pyramids, the dead or the latent Mycobacterium tuberculosis was found in these mummies. So this disease is a very old one that is familiar to the mankind. Now, Robert Koch was the first person who was able to actually isolate the strain of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in the year 1882. Until then, nobody was aware as to how does the Mycobacterium tuberculosis strain even look like. After the isolation of this Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacteria, it was not that immediately we could find treatment for the disease that this particular Mycobacterium tuberculosis was causing. After a very long time, the treatment was found. A few drugs, almost you can say after 60 years, some drugs were discovered, and these drugs helped in controlling this disease. Basically, tuberculosis is a very contagious disease, or the tubercular bacilli, as it is known as, is a highly contagious bacilli, and it spreads through the expulsion of the bacteria from the sputum from the infected person while the person is coughing, sneezing, or talking. Overall, poor hygienic conditions and poor population control, all these conditions further aggravate the condition of this spread of the disease. Now, this tubercular bacilli is a non-motile, very slowly growing aerobic bacteria, and it has a very special type of cell wall, which is called as, or the name of that cell wall is Mycolil arabino galactinopeptidoglycan. And from the name itself, you can guess that it is a macromolecule which is comprising of, or it is made up of, mycolic acid, it is made up of arabinose, it contains galactose, it contains peptidoglycans, and all of them are covalently bonded with each other. You are aware that covalent bonds are more difficult to break than any other bonds. Now, other than these, there are certain other substances also, like there are sulfolipids, there are phospholipids, there are proteins, there are other wax which are inserted into this extremely strong cell wall. And this is exactly the reason why there was so much of delay in discovering a drug, because penetration of any drug and crossing of the drug into the cell wall or through the cell wall into the bacilli itself is a challenge. So this is one of the issues, or one of the challenges that we face when we are treating a patient with tuberculosis. After the drugs were discovered by early 1990s, the world almost got eradicated of the disease, that is of tuberculosis. However, what was seen was, in the late 90s the disease re-emerged, and it re-emerged in a very dangerous form, wherein resistance had been developed to all the drugs which were known to us humankind, and none of the drugs were now being effective in the treatment of this tuberculosis infection. So these infections which reoccurred, or which started reoccurring in the late 90s, they were named itself as XDR and MDR TB, that is multiple drug resistant TB. The treatment of tuberculosis is never confined to only one drug. Always there is an array of, or a mixture of, chemotherapeutic agents which are used in the treatment of tuberculosis. Now whenever we study, we always study the mechanism of action of the drug. This time, when we are studying mechanism of action, we are also going to add to many of the classes the mechanism of drug resistance development, as well as to why did we start developing resistance to this drug. Now, the treatment of tuberculosis, because it involves many drugs in permutation and combinations, it also involves treatment for a very long regimen. Like the treatment goes on for 14 to 16 months, and obviously, as a human, the person gets fed up of taking so many drugs consistently for 14 or 16 months. So that is why also the drug resistant or the multiple drug resistance tuberculosis has developed. There are various ways in which you can classify anti-tubercular drugs. Like, you can classify them based on their mechanism of action. You can classify them based on the chemical structure. You can also classify them based on the line of action or the line of treatment that is being implemented, the way they are being used in the treatment of tuberculosis. Depending upon the chemical structure, the anti-tubercular drugs are classified as aminosalicylates and derivatives, heterocyclic amides, hydrazides and derivatives, thioureas and thiosemicarbazone derivatives, ethylene diamine derivatives, antitubercular antibiotics, and some newer antitubercular agents like fluoroquinolones, which we have already studied, or the macrolide antibiotics like clarithromycin and azithromycin. They are also used in the treatment of tuberculosis now. We shall be seeing each of these classes one by one. We will move on first to the class which has the drug isoniazid. It belongs to the class of hydrazides. The screen shows the structure of isoniazid or isonicotinic acid hydrazide, which belongs to the class of hydrazide derivatives. And this drug is having bacteriostatic action on the resting bacilli. That means when the bacilli is in its latent stage, and it is having a prominent antibacterial action or antimycobacterial action when the bacilli is in a growing stage or when it is in a multiplying stage. The primary action of this drug seems to be to inhibit the biosynthesis of mycolic acids, which are a part of the cell wall. And it has been known to all of us that the mycobacterial peroxidase enzyme complex is required for the bioactivation of this INH or isoniazid drug. So this isoniazid or the isonicotinic acid is responsible to be having inhibitory action on the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So in vivo, it is present as isonicotinic acid, and in vitro it is present as isonicotinic acid hydrazide. So it is sort of a prodrug which gets activated once it enters the human body. Once the INH penetrates through the Mycobacterium cell wall, it is enzymatically hydrolyzed to give isonicotinic acid, and then this isonicotinic acid competes with nicotinic acid and also interferes in the analog formation of NAD. And because of all these reactions, it inhibits the synthesis of mycolic acid. And once the mycolic acid synthesis is inhibited, the cell wall of the Mycobacterium tuberculosis will be weakened, and a weak cell wall will give entry uh, to other antimycobacterial drugs also, and there will be leakage of cell components as well. Now, this was about the mechanism of action. Like I said, we will also be seeing the mechanism of resistance development. So, in the case of development of resistance against this isonicotinic acid or isonicotinic acid hydrazide, there is mutation in the INHA which is responsible or is actually a very vital protein for the formation of mycolic acid. So if there is a change in this formation of INA or this INHA type of protein, then the altered proteins will be formed, and isonicotinic acid will not be effective on them. That is why resistance is developed. We shall now be moving on to the SAR studies also of this drug. This INH drug, or the SAR studies of this INH, basically what it mainly requires is the basic terminal nitrogen of the hydrazide, which is very essential for activity. Similarly, the transfer of hydrazide function either to the second or the third position will decrease the activity. Converting this hydrazide group to any other group such as carbonyl groups or amide groups, hydroxyamide groups, all of this will give inactive compounds which will have no antimycobacterial activity. However, we can convert them to 2,2-dialkyl hydrazides, and they have exhibited good potent, or they have found to be very potent in activity. Even 2,2, however, 2,2,2 trialkylated hydrazides are inactive in nature. Replacement of one of the hydrogens of the terminal nitrogen atom with the isopropyl moiety can give a compound which is having tuberculostatic activity and not lytic activity. And hydrazones obtained by reacting isoniazid with aldehydes and ketones will give compounds that have similar activity to isoniazid, and you can use them as prodrugs. We move on to the next drug or the next class, that is of para-amino salicylic acid. Para-amino-salicylic acid, as the structure you can see, is having a structure which is related to PABA, and it is mainly having bacteriostatic activity. It is also related to the class of sulfonamides that we have already studied, and it interferes with the incorporation of PABA into dihydrofolic acid. And this incorporation of PABA is catalyzed by dihydrofolate synthetase enzyme. So it will interfere with this, the incorporation of PABA itself, and it will also bind to the enzyme and have enzyme inhibitory activity. So this is the predicted mechanism of action of para-amino salicylic acid. We come to the SAR of para-amino salicylic acid. Replacement of this amine group or amino group with an amide or an alkoxy group or with tertiary amines will give us inactive compounds. Converting the COOH group, this group, to alkyl esters or amides will also give us inactive derivatives. Substitution of the hydroxyl group with an amino group or a thiol group again will give you inactive compounds. Modification in the position of the amino group and hydroxy group with respect to the carboxyl group shows loss of activity. So in short, you cannot change anything over here. You need to maintain the structure of para-amino salicylic acid to get antitubercular activity from it. This is the mechanism of synthesis of para-amino salicylic acid from salicylic acid. We now move on to the mechanism of action of para-amino salicylic acid. So the in vitro structure. We now move on to the next class or the next example of antitubercular agent, and that is pyrazinamide. This pyrazinamide is actually a prodrug, and this prodrug pyrazinamide will be activated by the pyrazinamidase enzyme. So this enzyme is active only in acidic conditions, and it is able to convert pyrazinamide to pyrazinoic acid. This pyrazinoic acid actually has antitubercular activity, and it inhibits the action of the fatty acid synthetase 1 enzyme, which is required for the development of fats in the bacterial cell. Now, if resistance has to be developed, there are two ways in which resistance can develop in the case of pyrazinamide. One is the pyrazinamidase enzyme itself will undergo mutation. So, the conversion of pyrazinamide to pyrazinoic acid will not happen, or the target of the pyrazinoic acid, which is the fatty acid synthetase enzyme, this itself will be targeted, it will undergo mutation, because of which fatty acid synthetase will be formed, or the fatty acids will be formed, but through a different mechanism of action, thereby leading to the development of resistance to this drug pyrazinamide. We move on to the SAR of this ring structure pyrazinamide, and what we see in the SAR studies is that the isosteric replacement of the pyrazine nucleus with a benzene nucleus. So this is the pyrazine nucleus that is visible to you. If you replace it with a benzene nucleus, you will have a compound which has lost its activity. The carboxamide group is crucial for activity. This is the carboxamide group, and the pyrazinoic acid ester and N-pyrazinyl thioureas. You can convert pyrazinamide to that to give you active compounds. However, these compounds, that is the ester of pyrazinoic acid and thiourea of pyrazinamide or pyrazinoic acid, they will show activity only in vitro. There will be no in vivo activity shown by these two compounds. The next drug for this class of antitubercular agents is ethambutol. Ethambutol is specifically active only against dividing mycobacteria. That means when the tuberculosis is in an active stage, and this is a very or highly stereospecific drug. Only its dextro form is active. In fact, the mesoform of the drug is more active, and the levo form of ethambutol is completely inactive in nature. Coming to the mechanism of action of ethambutol, we have seen previously that the cell wall structure of the Mycobacterium tuberculosis is very sturdy, and it contains different types of macromolecules. One such important macromolecule that it contains is arabinose, and for the incorporation of arabinose in the cell wall, the enzyme arabinose transferase is required. So this ethambutol drug inhibits the corporation of arabinose, leading to the formation of a weak cell wall in the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. When we think about resistance development, obviously mutation with the arabinotransferase enzyme will lead to development of drug resistance against ethambutol. Coming to the SAR studies of this drug ethambutol, extending the ethylene diamine, this chain will decrease the activity, replacing the nitrogen at both the positions. Both these two nitrogens will give less active compounds. Changing the location of hydroxyl group also will decrease the activity, and increasing the size of the substituent on the nitrogen will also cause loss of activity. So this is all about ethambutol, its SAR and mechanism of action. This is the synthetic pathway for synthesis of ethambutol from 1-nitropropane. We now come to antitubercular antibiotics, and the best example for this is streptomycin. Other than streptomycin, there is bleomycin, there is vancomycin. These drugs are also available, and they come into the class of antitubercular antibiotics used in the treatment of tuberculosis. Now these drugs, that is streptomycin, they have a specific structure that is visible to you. And in the antibiotic class, this streptomycin belongs to the class of aminoglycoside antibiotics, and they are basically protein synthesis inhibitors. Now, the two parts of the streptomycin structure is streptidin and streptobiosamine, which is further divided into streptose and N-methyl L-glucosamine. So, this is basically the sugar part. The streptose is the sugar part of streptomycin. Now, the action of streptomycin or this class of antibiotics, which are used as antitubercular agents, is very specific. They prevent the protein synthesis, or they are called as protein synthesis inhibitors. And they specifically bind to the 16S rRNA ribosomal subunit of the bacterial ribosome, thereby having inhibitory activity. Now, the advantage of using this class of antibiotics like streptomycin or aminoglycoside antibiotics as anti-tubercular drugs is that the human ribosome is not getting affected when you are using streptomycin, which means this drug streptomycin will not cause any harm to the human ribosome, because structurally the bacterial ribosome and human ribosome are very different from each other. Another advantage of using streptomycin is in patients who are suffering from AIDS and have contracted tuberculosis. So in these patients, streptomycin has seen to be very effective or very useful. The other examples of this class are capreomycin and bleomycin, also vancomycin. The next drug is cycloserine. Cycloserine has been isolated from different species, and it is known to be inhibiting the cross-linking of the peptide, which is required for strengthening the cell wall. It is basically an anti-metabolite for alanine. Now, alanine exists in two forms, D-alanine and L-alanine. And when the conversion has to happen from L-alanine to D-alanine, a particular enzyme called as alanine racemase enzyme is required. And if this enzyme is absent, then D-alanine uh, will not be formed from L-alanine, and this D-alanine needs to be get incorporated in the cell structure or in the cell wall. So if that is not there, you are going to have a very weak cell wall, thereby causing leakage of all the contents of the cell, as well as helping the other antitubercular drugs which you have. They will be able to get incorporated into the cell wall and show their in vivo antimycobacterial activity. The next class we have is that of rifamycins, and the most famous drug here is rifampicin. These all belong to this class. They are basically DDPR inhibitors. So DDPR is nothing but DNA dependent RNA polymerase enzyme, and they are these drugs, or rifampicin or rifamycin, they are binding to this DDPR. DDPR is having several units, and the most famous ones are alpha, beta, alpha dash and beta dash, and also gamma. So among these, the rifampicin drug is active only active on the beta subunit. It binds to the beta subunit, and it prevents the initiation of RNA synthesis, thereby having antitubercular activity. If you revise the structure of this rifampicin and study the SAR, it will be easier for you to go through. The SAR studies show that the hydroxyl group present at C1 and C8 are very essential for activity. Similarly, the hydroxyl groups present between carbon 21 and carbon 23 are also essential for activity. Hydroxyl group present is very important, because through this hydroxyl groups the drug is going to bind with the beta subunit of DDPR enzyme, and any acetylation that the drug will undergo will open the drug ring structures, and there will be reduction of the double bonds and loss of activity. So, like I said in the starting, when patient is being treated for tuberculosis, two drugs have to be given, or more than two drugs have to be given. You cannot give one drug individually or alone. Otherwise, it will lead to resistance development, and further there will be a lot of complications that will be formed. Similarly, a lot of follow-up is required when a patient is undergoing chemotherapy of tuberculosis, because the treatment in the hospital is for only for a very short period of time. However, treatment at home is very for a very prolonged period of time, and the pharmacist and the doctor has to regularly, frequently visit the patient, keep a good follow up, because for 4 to 6 months the patient has to take the same drug and follow the same drug regimen. So a lot of care has to has to be given to a patient who is undergoing the treatment of tuberculosis.